So tonight on Strange Appalachia, we've got a guest, someone who seems to be pretty knowledgeable in the subject of Sasquatch or Bigfoot, and that would be my 6-year-old son, Arlie. Arlie, you want to tell everybody what a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot is?
Yeah!
All right, tell them.
Hi, I'm Arlie, and I'm here to tell you what a Sasquatch is. A Sasquatch is a big hairy man who lives out in the forest.
What do you think he eats in the forest?
Animals,
Anything else?
people
And animals and people.
who go out to hunt.
I'm not entirely convinced he's wrong about that. So, where do they live out in the forest?
They make these big structures, and I think they live in them.
That's pretty good. All right, Arlie, I want to thank you for bringing your expertise to the show. So as you can tell from our introduction, tonight we're going to be talking about Bigfoot here on Strange Appalachia. Tonight's episode is going to be primarily about some of the physical properties of Bigfoot. We're going to do a mythological explanation tomorrow night on a different episode, but tonight I think we're just going to talk a little bit about physically what could Bigfoot be, where does it come from, some things like that. How does it live in the forest? If it's even real or not, because a lot of times those things can be mistaken greatly.
Yeah, there's been a big debate inside the Bigfoot community for years and years and years now on whether Bigfoot as an entity is, some kind of a physical manifestation, whether it's an actual animal, a human living out in the woods, or whether it's paranormal in nature, more mythological. Tonight we're going to focus on that physical aspect. Later we're going to hit that mythical aspect. But we'll definitely give both versions their due time because they're both fascinating.
Some of the cool stuff about Bigfoot in the forest, it's a tradition that dates back before the Europeans settled in the area. There's a lot of Native American myths. Some of those myths actually are misconstrued. Like the word Sasquatch simply means people who live in the forest. When they used to go into the area where they saw these people live, and they would talk to the local tribes and say, who are these people? And the reply they would get was Sasquatch. And of course, that name becomes synonymous with a Bigfoot, even though a lot of times it was just people living in the forest. So some confusion because of translation comes out. I know in the Cherokee, they have almost a demigod or a deity that they call Solo Kulu. And a lot of people will point at that myth as proof of a Cherokee Bigfoot, so to speak.
Yeah, so to focus in on the physical, guys, and just me personally, if I had to pick a side to be on, this would definitely be the side that I'm on, that Bigfoot or Sasquatch is some kind of a physical being that's out there, although I definitely don't think every sighting that gets reported is an actual Bigfoot. I think a lot of times there's misconceptions or mistaken identity, something like that going on. But as far as the physical things go, pretty much the two big schools of thought is, number one, that this is some kind of an ape, a North American ape that's running around in the forests around the area, or that it's just an actual person that is sort of living a natural lifestyle out in the woods, and it just sort of takes people by surprise when they come across these people.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how often things in the woods get twisted and misconstrued. Even amongst people who are avid outdoorsmen or outdoorsy people, more than once I've been taken by a sound that I've heard in the woods. And a lot of times these sounds, people will hear something and they can't explain it, and so they automatically chalk it up to Bigfoot or myths and legends that they know about. The classic hunter story of Bigfoot, you'll hear them talk about they went in the woods, something happens in the woods that's a little bit different than they're used to, or they'll see some signs that they're not used to in the woods. And then usually just before dusk as they're leaving, they'll hear a strange noise, a scream or a shout, something that they're not familiar with. and they'll chalk that up to a Bigfoot, when it could just be, you know, something as simple as a fox or a raccoon or a wild boar. Some of the noises that those animals are make are unbelievable, and you wouldn't chalk it up to something like a raccoon making, but they can be terrifying.
Yeah, and those noises are absolutely terrifying at times because you're thinking there is no way that some wild animal out here in the woods is making that noise. And the one that most Bigfoot researchers go to is when somebody reports they hear a scream or a yell of some kind, is the first question out of most people's mouth, do you know what an owl sounds like? As weird as that sounds, the owl is makes some of the weirdest noises in the forest.
I know that I've been with some Bigfoot research before and played on raccoon noises, and actually had one guy actually tell me, "Well, you just debunked 2/3 of what I've got, you know, with just raccoon noises." But raccoons are extremely common, and so their sounds are going to be common. But some of the sounds that people do chalk up to Bigfoot are whoops and hollers, um, long drawn out yells. Uh, and actually, there's some of those sounds that I've heard that I can't explain. You know, I don't know exactly what they would be, and they don't match anything that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, the other sort of sound phenomenon that gets associated with Bigfoot many times, other than the whoop or the yell, is the wood knocking. And wood knocking is something that I've heard in the woods myself probably hundreds of, maybe even thousands of times. And 99% of the time, if you look really hard, you're going to notice that number one, the wind's blowing, and that number two, there is a tree that is either about to fall or has already fallen in the area, and it's hitting against another tree. Now, there are times that, you know, whether it's because the tree's far away or high up, sort of covered with the canopy, that I may be missing it. And then there are other times that I have no idea what has caused that wood knocking, but wood knocking is definitely something that's associated with Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Yeah, we actually had an incident. I guess you can call it an incident, an encounter, so to speak, where we were out camping one night, and the fire had went out, and an animal had came into our camp, and I actually woke JD up to get a flashlight from him. And of course, he didn't want to wake up. He threw the light at me.
Well, it was 3 o'clock in the morning.
It was pretty, yeah, it was pretty early. So we flashed the animal and it ran off. I decided to get up and get the fire roaring again just to keep the animals out. And when I did, something less than 100 yards away from us started wood knocking. And of course, me and JD both were at a loss as to what that could be. It didn't start until the fire started up, and it had a repeated pattern. It was 3 knocks in a row. We actually tried to wood knock back to it, but we never got an answer from it. So, you know, if it was a Bigfoot, which I kind of lean against it being a Bigfoot, I don't think that it was.
No, I don't either, but it's certainly an odd coincidence.
Yeah, something weird, definitely strange that happened to us in the woods. But the area, though, that it happened in is somewhere that hopefully this weekend we'll be able to investigate. We've been up there several times, and it is on High Knob, which is a hot spot for Bigfoot. A lot of people see it in the area, and it's also near Chandler Mountain, which is also a sighting area. So, you know, who knows what it is? I think that if there was a Bigfoot in that area, we would definitely have seen it before now. But some strange
I
things
agree.
do happen up there.
And you'll see this hopefully in the video that we shoot this weekend of the investigation. One of the things that Charlie always likes to look for, and we try to point out as often as we can, is, you know, if there's something out there that's taking limbs or sticks or whatever and beating it against a tree, it's going to leave a mark on it. And even there's been a few times that we've found places that look like, you know, something's hit a tree with a stick. Now, whether it was somebody walking by or a tree falling or a Bigfoot, you know, it's hard to tell. But that's something that we look for that a lot of people overlook. They don't think about. They listen for it, but they don't look to see if that mark's there.
Yeah, that scarring is something that would definitely stand out, especially in a somewhere that there's not supposed to be any people around.
Right. And this is definitely a very low population area that we'll be at.
All right, JD, cover some of the ecology behind it. Talk about some the the things it might eat.
All right. So if Bigfoot is flesh and blood, which again, that's what I lean towards, just like any other flesh and blood animal, it's got to have its basic necessities. You've got to have food, you've got to have water, and you've got to have shelter. Those things aren't negotiable. If you don't have those, you can't live in that area. And the Appalachian Mountains are very plentiful for all three of those things. We talked on an earlier episode about the karst topography in the area. There's a lot of caves that have been whittled down over time and hollowed out by water and erosion. So, as far as shelter goes, caves are definitely in abundance here. On top of that, many people say that Bigfoot lives, or Bigfoot creatures, whatever, will make like log shelters, lean-to type things. And you can sort of see an example of that in this video as it's scrolling by. There's a picture of a shelter that was constructed at scout camp that I took a picture of. And this thing is absolutely ginormous. And these kids built this thing in like 2 hours one day. So if a group of 15-year-old kids can build something as massive as this thing, I'm for those of you who may not have the ability to look at this visual, it stands about probably 6 feet off the ground, and it's probably 10 to 14 feet wide. So it's just this absolute ginormous. Basically, they took a fallen tree and put it between the V and another tree and just started putting limbs on the side of it. And I would say that they didn't have to walk more than 10 foot to make all that happen. So, if Bigfoot came along and wanted to build one of these structures, there's certainly plenty of deadfall and limbs laying about that it could use to do this. But most of the time, when Charlie and I have been out, in the woods, any structure like that we come across is easily explainable as fallen, a tree that just happened to fall in the right direction, or it's obvious that somebody has been there and built a lean-to.
Yeah,
So,
I've not seen very many of the tree structures that I've been really impressed with.
no,
There's been a handful that I've looked at, and it's really made me question what I'm looking at. That's the funny thing about the flesh and blood side of Bigfoot, is that just about the time that I've convinced myself it doesn't exist, somebody will come up with a new piece of evidence that'll pull me back in. And then just about the time I'm about to convince myself that it does exist, somebody will debunk a piece of evidence that I thought was pretty foolproof before. So that's why I really stay on the fence as to whether it's real or not. More recently, I've been leaning more toward it not being real because of some of the stuff that I've seen.
yeah, and I believe I'm in the same boat with you there. If there is a Bigfoot out there, if it is real, not only do I lean towards it being flesh and blood, but I also lean towards it not being in this area. It's just hard to imagine with how often these hills and mountains get traveled that nobody's come up with anything definitive yet.
Yeah, the fact that you don't see it dead on the side of the road. Every animal in North America has been ran over by a car. And that's actually one of the ways that a lot of biologists will identify the types of animals that are in an area, is they'll, check a roadside.
Yeah.
Um,
And a lot of people are saying, as a counterpoint to that argument, well, it's smarter than most of the animals out there. I would argue so are humans, and you still see humans that get hit by cars or hit by moving vehicles.
yeah,
So,
they can't figure out to look both ways. I mean,
yeah.
it happens. So,
So, I mean, with that being said, either this thing is the luckiest animal in the world, or it's smarter than humans. And both of those are sort of scary thoughts to think about.
yeah. Well, one of the conspiracy theories around Bigfoot, you hear a lot of people will say that the government hides it because it'll damage the logging industry. People won't let you log if they know that there's some type of a endangered creature there, especially something like a is that Bigfoot is a $1 billion a year industry.
All right,
And
Charlie, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. You broke up in the middle of that last thought. If you want to go back
yeah,
to that.
yeah. So the conspiracy theory with Bigfoot, a lot of people say is uh, is that the government hides Bigfoot so that it won't damage the timber industry. Because if there's a large ape in an area hiding, then obviously they won't let them cut down the trees. But to me, the conspiracy theory behind Bigfoot is to keep the thing perpetuated.
Right.
If you prove Bigfoot's real, you're going to lose money because there are going to be fewer people out looking for it. But if you prove it's fake, you're going to lose a lot more money that way because there's going to be less people looking for it. And Bigfoot is a $1 billion a year industry. That's billion with a B. Billions and billions and billions of dollars are spent on Bigfoot.
Right, and we'll talk about that economy around that a little bit on a later episode about some towns in our area that are trying to sort of capitalize on some of that. But we'll come back to that later. Going back to the talking points you asked about there, food and water in the Appalachian Mountains is really not an issue. We talked in the episode about Cracker's Neck and the origin story there of how all these springs sort of just sprout out of nowhere in these mountains. So water is not an issue most of the time unless you're just absolutely on top of the mountain and not looking. Finding water is not an issue at all. It's everywhere across these mountains, so that's not a big issue. And then food is basically the same way. We have berries, we have some edible mushrooms. Although off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you which ones they are. My general rule there is if I come across a mushroom, I don't eat it.
Yeah, I can identify two. I can tell you what the chicken of the woods is, and I can tell you what the dryland fish looks like.
Yeah, and other than that dryland fish, I wouldn't feel comfortable eating any of them. But anyway, food is very plentiful. I mean, there are bear in this area, and they're 200 to 300 pound animals, and there's enough food to sustain a population of them easily. And deer, plus all the other stuff we've got. So food and water for a Bigfoot in this area would not be an issue because, like I said, it's everywhere.
Yeah, as long as you're hibernating through the winter, but even in the wintertime, there's still grubs to dig. There's still, you know, some stuff to eat. It's just harder to find.
Yeah. Now something as big as a Bigfoot would probably need to hibernate or go into torpor, kind of like bears do, and basically shut down during the winter. Because I don't know that there's enough food available for something that large during the winter, at least to sustain itself on a daily basis. But anyway, something big like that could definitely find food here most of the year.
I know that they did a really cool layover of a map of the rain in the U.S., the rain arc, and how it, the middle of the U.S. doesn't get a lot of rain, or compared to the edges, and it makes basically an arc. And they overlaid that with Bigfoot sightings, and the sightings occur primarily on the wet side of that arc. And so that's a pretty interesting correlation. You would think that if it was something that was truly not real, that it would be sighted everywhere equally. But
Right.
that doesn't seem to be the case. So it's just another one of those things that would make you think that it was give you argument that it could be a real animal.
All right. The other thing with this that we look for when we go out are broken limbs that supposedly, according to different researchers, Bigfoot will go through and break a limb to sort of mark a trail use it as a trail marker in case more Bigfoot are coming behind it. Big feet. Not really sure what the plural of that is, but
Yeah, so, specifically, the break is a break and a twist. You'll see a twist in it. And, I don't know, I have no idea in nature how that really occurs. I mean, I'm sure it does. But to find that pattern repeatedly throughout the forest, it's just something else to make you wonder about what you're seeing. It's not
and
something personally I've ever found. I've never found a tree that's been broken and twisted.
I've not either. Um,
Um,
and if I
and I know
did, I would probably 99% of the time chalk it up to a hunter.
I know a lot of people put a lot of credence into that, and a lot of people have a lot of luck finding it. You know, whether it be something it could be simple as a hoax, or it could be something as unlikely as there actually being a 9 foot tall ape walking around.
Right. All right. Well, I think that pretty well covers everything that I can think of from the physical aspect of Bigfoot. Is there anything you can think of? Anything else you'd like to add in?
No, I think we hit it all. Personally, I mean, we've had a few run-ins that we've had of things in the woods that we can't explain. We'll get into that more when we talk about the Sasquatch sanctuary this weekend. But the physical aspect of Bigfoot, the physical belief, it's really interesting. I actually find it kind of boring though, because it's just an animal in the woods. Um, I'm always interested in the fact that there's no fossil record of an animal even remotely close to a Bigfoot. Um, Everybody wants to say the Gigantopithecus, is something similar to a Bigfoot, but it was probably more akin to an orangutan or a gorilla than something that walked on its hind legs. And it was also, if it stood erect, it was also about 15 foot tall, which is much, much larger than what you'd expect a Bigfoot to be. And also, it walked on fours. Probably, we really don't know. We don't have that much evidence on.
Right. And I mean, the sort of nerd biology teacher in me, this is the thing that I find the most interesting, that there might be this flesh and blood creature out here that, you know, nobody's found yet. How is that possible? And looking at it from that aspect, the biology teacher in me, biology major, is like, all right, we got to find this thing.
Well, it's something we'll keep looking for. We always make jokes. My wife always makes jokes about, when you're gonna find Bigfoot so we can get rich. And that's something that the mythology of Bigfoot, we call it Bigfoot Famous. People trying to get famous on Bigfoot. And some people it works out for them, and some people it doesn't. But it's kind of weird that everybody in the Bigfoot community, a lot of them really, really are focused on that Bigfoot Famous, even more so than they are on the actual research.
Right.
But from what I found, the ones that are the most successful are the ones that focus on the research, and then it's almost like the fame finds them.
Right.
So, Bigfoot's definitely my favorite cryptid. On a personal note, that's what my groom's cake was when we got married. Was a Bigfoot print.
Yeah, and it tasted good too.
Now it was awesome. My wife's mother can cook, that's for sure.
All right. Well, if you don't have anything else to add in, we'll get off here. And again, if you're tuned in, you like what you hear, give us a like and subscribe while you're here. And stay tuned in. Hopefully, in the next day or two, we'll be back on with another video. Until then,
Awesome.
have fun. Stay out of trouble, y'all.
Yeah, and if you got any messages or anything, shoot those to us too. We'll be happy to answer any questions we can.